I don't know if looking at the camera is like necessary or not,
Like, is that the better move?
but I think probably because that's who we're talking to.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll figure it out. Okay. So you attended the Braiding Knowledge
Mm-hmm.
webinar
Mm-hmm.
on what was it about?
It was about Bill C5.
Bill C5.
Yeah.
And what is Bill C5? Because I've heard of it, but I'm not totally like
Right. So
up to
I
speed.
hadn't heard of it.
You had not heard of it. Okay.
No. It caught my attention when I saw it because I knew it had to do with environmental impacts.
Yep.
And that was my grab.
Okay.
So I had no idea what Bill C5 was all about. I'm still learning. I still don't know. But what it is an act to enact the Free Trade and Labor Mobility in Canada Act and the Building Canada Act. So Bill C5 is composed of two acts.
So this is not like Indigenous centric. It's
No.
all of Canada bill.
It's all of Canada. It just has severe impacts for Indigenous people.
So read that description again.
So the first part is the Free Trade and Labor Mobility in Canada Act.
Okay, so that would be like free trade and labor mobility between provinces, territories, and hopefully and First Nations.
Yeah, that's right. And then the second part is called the Building Canada Act, and that's the part that they focused on, and that's the part that I focused my research on. The part one is mostly just bringing down interprovincial regulators to make trade easier within Canada.
Gotcha.
That part they didn't focus on too much. It's the Building Canada Act that is a little more troublesome.
What do you have a breakdown on what that is?
Yes, that's what all of this is. It's basically the Building Canada Act is all about prioritizing projects of national interest, so ponies, and making projects of national interest.
Okay.
Yeah, so pony project. Yeah, ponies. Yeah.
They could have called them unicorn projects.
Yeah.
Okay, pony projects. Okay.
Pony projects. It's all about prioritizing ponies and making it easier for the country to achieve those ponies by breaking down the approval process and legislation and all of the pieces that go into approving national projects.
Okay, I totally know what graphic I'm going to use for the social media for this, because ponies is now going to become like a fairly okay, that's a great acronym. Okay, yeah. So breaking down all those projects, what they are, how throughout Canada we can kind of work more collaboratively on these things.
In theory.
Okay. And did they give an introduction of like the organization that was hosting the webinar? Like
the Braiding Knowledge?
Braiding Knowledge?
Sort of. They were mostly just the host. They had all these panelists from all these different places, and they weren't necessarily involved in Braiding Knowledge. They just invited these experts to talk about it.
Okay.
So they were just sort of the host.
Gotcha.
And all these other panelists were there to speak about it from different parts of the country.
Okay.
One of the panelists was actually at the COP30, like the United Nations Climate Change Conference. He was there in Brazil on behalf of BC. So that was kind of cool. And he had some different... Yeah,
were they Indigenous or?
Yeah, I think so. He didn't. Yeah, they didn't identify that way, but yeah, they were there as a representative. So
so your key takeaways on the Bill C5 and the ponies.
My key takeaways are that I think it'll take steps back in the environmental aspects that we've and in the Indigenous kind of reconciliation.
So what indicators gave you that? Like, what did you hear or see that?
Well, the issue with the Building Canada Act is it bypasses the usual regulatory environmental assessments that need to be done for regular projects.
Yeah.
With the idea that this is a priority project and we need to break down barriers in achieving it. And by doing that, there's two issues. One is the environmental assessments don't get done properly. So the environmental impacts are going to be so much worse than they normally would have been. And it bypasses the free, prior, informed consent piece of Indigenous people's kind of interaction with those projects. And so the FPIC, so the free, prior, informed consent piece, gets taken away. And So now Indigenous peoples feel like they don't get a say in whether these projects happen.
So is that written in all of this? Or
Yes,
is that like an assumption that people are making,
it's,
do you think?
I don't know if it's necessarily written in it that they don't have that
Yeah.
piece. However, it was brought to the Senate as an amendment to include free, prior, informed consent as written language, and it got denied.
Okay, so free prior consent is a thing that exists anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's written in other things
Mm-hmm.
that it has to be done. It's not specifically stated in this
Yeah.
bill,
Mm-hmm.
which leaves room. Probably people are thinking that,
Mm-hmm.
well, then, it's not a priority.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just doesn't, make it a priority. They did try to add it and it was denied. So that just kind of, to me, communicates the
So I wonder if
intent.
they denied it because it would have taken too much time to add it,
Perhaps. Yeah.
or there's like a diabolical reason to exclude it.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's hard to say. I mean, in terms of rushing it through, that's been the trend this whole time. I mean,
Right.
this bill got put forward in June. Deliberations happened over the summer, and by September it was
right.
enacted. So
Okay.
they did push it through really quickly, which is another issue that
Yeah.
they had is people weren't allowed to kind of
Mm,
debate it or think about it or bring issues forward. They just sort
Right.
of rushed this bill through, and then after it was enacted, then they brought forward an Indigenous advisory committee.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
after
the
the fact.
advisory committee was brought in after it passed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So people are a little concerned about that as well.
Concerned.
That the Indigenous Advisory Committee wasn't a part of the initial planning process.
They didn't get to
and
see the ponies first.
That's right. Well, and only one minister gets to decide the ponies.
Which minister is that?
They're not sure yet. They're thinking the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, but it
You would have
hasn't
said
been
Minister of
designated.
Agriculture and Livestock.
Yeah, it hasn't been defined yet. So
That's okay. So now, so we're at this state where this bill's going through. Okay, what else stuck out for you in terms of the webinar?
well, there was a good variety of panelists. They had lots of different. There was one representative for like youth and youth
Okay.
engagement, and they had a really good point of saying that when these things come to pass, they talk about, oh, we need to make the earth better for the next generations, and the
Yeah.
youth are the future. And they had a really good point of saying like youth are today, youth
Yeah.
are now,
Yeah.
young people are right now, and they're not getting a chance to be involved in these things.
Was it in like Indigenous youth?
Yeah, and
It
just
was,
youth
okay.
in general, but
Youth in general.
Indigenous youth not having a chance to be part of these discussions
Right.
because it's always, oh, youth are tomorrow, youth are
Okay.
the future,
Yeah.
and they're right now, they're here today.
So the makeup of the panel doing the webinar, like, was it was a mix of like Indigenous, non-Indigenous people?
I think mostly Indigenous. They
Mostly, okay.
didn't identify themselves,
But,
they just sort of
yeah.
introduced their name and where they were
There
coming
should have
from.
been. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of the webinar again was to like educate people on where things are at, what's going on. What kind of shocked you, or like what? Because when you mentioned it to me on Friday, you said
Mhm.
you might have had words for a certain politician.
Yeah. It was mostly just, well, a few things. One was that the ponies, the projects of national interest, they get designed or determined by one minister. So it just takes out that piece of collaboration and talking
Right.
about, well, what does national interest mean to the whole country?
Right.
So that piece where the Indigenous people don't get a say in what is a national interest, they talked a lot about. It's just repeating that colonial cycle of colonial people telling Indigenous people what their interests
What their
are.
interests are. So it'll be interesting to find out who that minister is,
Mhm.
because it's probably not going to be the Indigenous Services minister. And if it's a totally new department, like or a department that Indigenous chief and councils are not used to dealing with,
Mhm.
it means like, I wonder for them how they're going to adjust their lobbying and advocacy
Yeah.
strategy to kind of have to deal with a whole new system.
Yeah.
And one that goes beyond like just writing some letters and putting them on Facebook. It's,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be attending meetings, who's going to have a voice, who's going to advocate. So from an emergency management perspective, the environmental piece,
Mm-hmm.
because yes, when you take on like these big projects quickly, definitely the environmental is sacrificed,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's right.
And probably some health and safety
Sure.
too, if
Yeah.
people are having to work more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So was there any mention of like environmentally what some
Yeah.
concerns were?
Yeah. Big time, because they talked about, well, what in the past, what has been of national interest. And
Right.
it's been things like pipelines and things that regularly destroy the earth.
Yeah.
And now those environmental assessments are being reduced to a set of conditions that they have to check the boxes on.
Yeah.
And that's all that they need to do in terms of environmental consideration. So projects that are already environmentally, hard
Sure.
on places are being reduced now to just a set of checklists
Okay.
rather than the vigorous environmental assessments that they usually go through.
Right.
So it's kind of twofold in
Right.
that way, where the environment gets completely disregarded for
Yeah.
these projects.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder how that's going to play out in the end, because I don't know, like, okay, let's say the projects that have had rigorous environmental,
Mm-hmm.
um, like I would have thought like Site C Dam for BC Hydro, that should have had rigorous environmental
Mm-hmm.
impact assessments, but like the downstream
Yeah.
impacts are quite noticeable. And there are First Nations that are downstream that we're not consulted with, and it is impacting. And that's when the system was like fully up and running.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder, like, is there going to be actually anything worse going to happen? Like,
That was the topic, was yes.
yeah,
It seems
for
as
sure.
though, because if those projects went through the rigorous environmental impact assessment, checklist that was already in place, and there are still incredibly negative impacts that people
Yeah.
are experiencing, what's going to happen now when those rigorous processes are taken away?
Yeah. So I wonder what, like, did they give examples of what we might see
No,
in
not
terms of that?
specifics. They talked more so about, just their kind of take on it.
Right.
No specific examples were given.
Okay.
The bill is just brand new, so they didn't. It's a
Yeah.
lot of speculation at this point.
Because it's a lot of mining,
Yeah,
probably.
mining, like precious
Mineral.
minerals,
Hydro.
pipelines, those kinds of projects. So, just what we've seen in the past and what we can kind of expect based on what has been indicated as a project of national interest.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see on the environmental side, given like that we've had a pretty good, and we are environmentally, I think, can always do better, but
Mhm.
I mean, we're not as bad as some countries.
Yeah.
If we pull back a little bit, what's that going to look like
Mhm.
in the long term?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
They did indicate that, First Nations, especially on reserve and remote communities, they'll feel the impacts first.
Right. For sure.
And it's whether or not their voices are heard when they start to bring those things
Right.
forward.
Right.
And if they say this is really not working because we're seeing this, this, and this, are those concerns going to be taken into consideration and kind of revamp how we do things?
So, okay. So yeah, that leads me to thinking, like, for First Nations, they are going to have to revamp their risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they've had a recent risk assessment, they're going to have to revamp that. Or if they have not, they're going to now have to consider the risk of reduced environmental policies or environmental regulations, which is going to increase their risk in a lot of areas. But it's probably if it's environmental, it's probably going to be like a lot of slow burn risks. Like, again, how's it going to impact water? How's it going to impact food sovereignty and security? How's it going to impact air quality? Even having like all of the mining dust and pollutants like fall onto the land.
Right.
Like, how is that? They're going to have to revisit their risks in a big way.
Exactly. And is there money in the Indigenous Services Canada budget for those new risk assessments?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one because that's actually a good question. Like, where are First Nations going to get the funding to redo their risk assessments if they're within like one of these pony
Mm-hmm.
projects or near a pony project?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is the federal government providing funding within those projects for like an environmental risk assessment? Or do nations have to go through like EMAP, non-structural mitigation, or the Emergency Management Assistance Program, right? Like that's going to be an interesting one for communities to look at because they might be able to take advantage of some funding through EMAP that they normally wouldn't have considered.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good question.
Yeah, hard to say. They did specify, like before issuing a pony, the minister has to check off all these boxes to make sure that it's okay to move forward. One of them is that it has to satisfy the environmental authorizations, and there's a long list. Like it's the Fisheries Act and the Canadian Navigable Waters Act, and there's a whole list. Except that, and that's great that they have to satisfy all of those acts. But there's a little piece of fine print that says that the minister can add, change, or delete any of those conditions at any time. Yeah. So people are worried that those acts are listed in this nice long list. Okay, we have to satisfy all of these things to, promote this bill. And then a few months down the line, maybe things change.
For this project, and depends on who's lobbying and depends on this and that. They have total authority to kind of remove things. Okay.
And it's the total authority piece that is really concerning because there's just no collaboration. There's no committee that's coming together to talk about these things. It's one minister gets to decide. And the only thing the minister has to do once they've decided is talk to the other minister that it has to do with. And they do have to inform Indigenous people whose rights may be adversely affected. What that means is not clear. Like, what would you consider an adverse effect?
Yeah. And to which rights and to what? Like,
exactly.
Because there's even like, if you're the government, you're probably also saying, oh, well, we're not even really sure what rights they have.
That's right. And maybe they'll downplay what the adverse effects will be because they don't want to
stall the project. And that's like, it's definitely a big change. It's definitely a big change and a continuance of, the government, the crown going forward with projects that really only look at like an economic viability thing instead of like a environmental or social or life kind of quality aspect. Like well, what else kind of came up on the webinar? Like what other takes were there on it or concerns?
The Indigenous Advisory Committee was spoken about because it sounds great. They have 11 members on this committee, and they're supposed to be a blend of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And that sounds great. But we only talked about one area of the committee, but I did a little more researching because I wanted to know who was part of this. And it is very stretched.
Gotcha.
And even 11 members for the whole country representing 3 Indigenous groups feels a little skim.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway that this one representative had was that there's no First Nations representative for Manitoba. Like not a single one.
Did they say why?
Nope. They just said they were concerned because Manitoba represents the second largest First Nations group in Canada. And 53 or something % of those Indigenous people live on reserve.
Yeah.
So to not have a single Manitoba representative for First Nations is very concerning.
Yeah.
And they were I'm not sure what the government's thought process was there. They do have a representative from Manitoba, but they're Métis. So they were just saying like, that's not the same. Like you can't just check off the Manitoba box because you have a Métis representative and not a First Nations representative.
Yeah.
Right. And there's only 2 Métis representatives in the whole committee and only 1 Inuit representative.
Oh, wow.
So it was that's where it feels skim.
Yeah.
There's 1 representative for each coast, even though the coasts represent a whole vast landscape of environmental issues.
Yeah.
And the rest are kind of congested to like there's a couple from Ontario, a couple from Quebec,
Yeah.
and that's kind of it. Like it just, the committee is very tight.
It's, yeah. And why 11?
Yeah.
Like where did that number come from?
And yeah.
How did they pick all that? Okay, that's interesting. So at the end of it all, like what did they offer an opportunity for people to ask questions?
Kind of. Yeah, people were asking questions throughout, more so just wondering, what can we do
Yeah.
now that this has come to pass?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of Indigenous groups that are coming together and trying to figure out, how can we present our concerns
Right.
in a way that's compelling and is actually going to create change. So there are groups that you can join and you can, become a part of the conversation. But it was more so an awareness webinar where
Yeah.
they just were sort of trying to present the information
Yeah.
so that people could, be informed.
So if I'm a Indigenous Emergency Management Coordinator, First Nations on reserve or Inuit or working in the Métis world, I guess that leads me to like what can they do and what should they know in terms of all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And emergency management was probably not discussed. Was there anyone there?
No.
Okay. So yeah, like definitely learning about this on the
Mhm.
environmental side, beefing up on like environmental terminology.
Yep.
Getting to understand what project is in their area, getting involved in the risk assessment
Mm-hmm.
for that, the environmental assessments, like just even if an emergency management coordinator can get invited to regional meetings about the
Mhm.
projects, then at the very least for their community, they can pass on information to other managers, members,
Mm-hmm.
council, if chief and council aren't attending them. They can fill that gap from that perspective because yeah, they should be taking a look at what's the impact going to be on the community
Yeah.
and start
What to
looking at that
expect.
now.
Yeah. And I would say too, like beefing up your mitigation and
Yeah.
prevention
Yeah.
strategies because
Yeah.
these things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And the more prepared you can be, the better.
So that'll be back to your earlier question, like, yeah, what is ISK going to like? Is ISK getting more money from an emergency management perspective for these projects if there is a heightened risk?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know because the preamble
They're
of the
probably not even
bill.
thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard because the preamble of the bill does state that environmental consideration is a top priority. So they may be saying, well, we don't need to provide more funds because we are making sure that the environment is
Yeah.
a top priority because we have this small set of checklists, like we're covered, we're good.
Right.
You don't need any extra money because we've got it covered. But I
Mm.
just, whether that's
Yeah,
true
that's
is
not true.
another.
No. Because if you're a community like 50 kilometers away from one of these projects
Mm-hmm.
and they're already going through like reduced consultation, reduce this, moving things quickly, are they putting funds aside from a risk and emergency management perspective or even a disaster resilience perspective or disaster risk reduction perspective, saying, yeah, we're going to like fund these nations to update their risk assessments and then from that fund mitigation prevention strategies? Like, I just really don't think they're thinking that far ahead.
I think in their minds, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
They don't need to fund those things because in their minds, they are covering their bases.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no need for extra precautions made. There's no
Yeah.
need for any of this because we have our checklist. And in doing that, we're set.
Yeah. So emergency management coordinators or directors of EM on reserve, especially, even with like the hydro project that was, I think it's in Nunavut, or did they mention? I forget where there was a hydro project near an Inuit community that was just released. Like even they need to be, emergency management coordinators need to be, digging in on this stuff right now. And it's going to be really hard because they're just focused probably on like wildfires and floods and evacuations and current recoveries. Now they're having to like add this whole other issue onto their plate. Like this issue, like each community would need a dedicated coordinator
Sure.
just to manage, like if someone's got a huge new mine coming up near their community, like they will need at least one person to do it. And we know
Yeah.
ISK isn't funding multiple
That's right.
pieces. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
And it's just, like you say, it's the slow burn
Yeah.
impacts that they're going to have to think about
Yeah.
on top of the imminent impacts that
Yeah.
they're already thinking about.
Well, and there's like, okay, so these new mines, these new projects, how many transient workers are going to be brought nearby the community to work? And what does that bring? It brings a whole influx of like new risks in terms of people in the region, drugs, potentially more crime, using up resources like, you know, just at the grocery stores, like people coming into town, drinking. Not saying that like all these workers drink and stuff, but it does bring, when you have a whole new transient group of people coming into your region, there's risks with that.
Absolutely.
And like, is law enforcement going to be bumped up? Like nation security, like it's just going to bring in a whole bunch of issues.
And I don't think any of that
is
considered.
it never has been.
No.
Like wherever we've done projects like this in Canada, it's never been. It's just like get in there, mine, make the money, extract everything, leave kind of mentality.
Exactly.
So
and I think it's going to be more, it's going to be the same and more.
Yeah.
From what it sounds like, because these projects are being rushed, they're being pushed through so quickly.
Yeah.
That it's going to be everything that we've seen and more.
Yeah. So okay, well, what else? Anything else that you heard or saw at the webinar that you think we missed or should be mentioned?
I mean, not really. It's just a lot of that conversation of what are the implications?
Yeah.
What do people need to know?
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do at this point to kind of shape it as it becomes something more, something bigger? But it's so new that it's hard to say right now what.
Is it new though? Well, I don't think it's new in the sense that nations have been dealing with this kind of issue forever.
Yeah.
These are new projects. And a new bill.
That's right.
But I would say at like maybe at the heart or at the root of it, it's much of the same. So nations, I think, have an opportunity again to like continue to reevaluate the last 150 years as a way to predict the next 20 years.
And I think like, yes, and in part of that as well is people are concerned that Canada won't be able to fulfill its UNDRIP requirements with this new bill. And that is an opportunity for Indigenous groups to bring that forward. Yeah. And there could be legal repercussions if the UNDRIP requirements aren't being met. And that is a spot where people can come in and really advocate because UNDRIP is, part of...
Yeah, but Canada doesn't care.
Yeah.
They, what they're looking at this right now from a lens of, all right, if we break these human rights, this is the legal repercussion and the financial one. Those do not outweigh the economic value. Right. Yeah. So it's risk to them, right? It's like, all right, we'll be tied up for 10 years in 13 different human rights court cases that are going to cost us $800 million. But if we push through and get all these things going, we're going to see a $5 trillion revenue over the next 50 years and 150,000 new jobs.
Right.
The government will be happy to spend $800 million in 10 years in court to fight all of that. And then at the end of all of that, when the courts say you should have done this and you should have done this and you have to pay out this money to communities and you've got to pay out $200 million to this community for violating the rights, environmental rights, the government will be like, okay, we'll pay that all out and apologize. But they're still ahead, right, in the marketplace and everything. So, and the government too, their strategy is always to outweight. So in 10, 15 years from now, when all of that is settled, like who's going to be around that's here today to hold them accountable, right? Yeah. It's going to be very difficult.
I think that's where a good conversation about the youth piece comes in.
Yes.
Because if you can involve young adults and youth
now.
in this conversation right now, then they will be
They
around
will be
in 10,
here.
15 years
Yeah.
and they can continue the momentum,
Yeah.
continue the conversation so that it doesn't just get lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
And they can outweight the government and they can win that race.
So there's got to be youth dedicated to this now
Mm-hmm.
and make it part of their life's work to kind of, if they want to create real change for themselves and their future generations.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's why like for us, we're trying to get like more youth involved in emergency management because it's a great place to start because they can be involved in all of these things under that emergency management hat and move into a career at the same time that's involved with these things and keep pushing a lot of this forward. Right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. What else?
Those are kind of, I felt like I had another point, but it slipped away. Yeah, those are really the discussions. The main thing that I took away too from the checklist that the minister has to go through in terms of that, informing Indigenous people of those adverse effects. One thing that really stood out to me is like, why is it only that Indigenous people get brought into the conversation when there's potential for adverse effects?
Right.
Why can't they just be part of the conversation?
Right.
And that brings it all back to the colonial practices of we will decide what is an adverse effect for you.
Yeah.
Rather than having them at the table to say, well, maybe there's no adverse effects, but there's no positive effects either.
Yeah.
And just because you're not getting adversely affected by something doesn't mean it's benefiting you either.
Yeah, because there's nobody at the government sitting there thinking, oh, it's going to impact their culture. It's going to impact their language. It's going to impact their spirituality. It's going to impact the land. It's going to impact their youth and the and their health and their social connections. Like if there are people in the government that are thinking about those things, they are not at the right level for that to be seriously considered. And even if they are at the right level, they know that it's not going to go anywhere because even the higher up people are focused on jobs, economy, exports, imports, right? Votes.
Right.
So it's very difficult to have a whole system within the crown, even within like health areas and community development areas. It's still very difficult within those systems to look at these social connections that are important, relationship connections, and advocate for that internally. Like it just,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I left the webinar feeling fired up in some aspects and disheartened in others.
Right.
It overall, to me, it just feels like two big steps back in the environmental piece, and then in the Indigenous reconciliation piece.
So for you, now that you've kind of like, my phone's ringing. For you, now that this is kind of like embedded, you've embedded yourself in this issue a little bit. Like, what are you going to do next in terms of this? It'll stop ringing in a second. Wait. Oh, I'll just turn it on mute. I should have turned it off.
That's okay. I hope mine's off.
That's okay. So for you, like, what's your next kind of
steps?
What do you want to do next in terms of this issue and keeping up with it? And like, is it something you want to continue to focus on, or is it just like, I attended, I have some education on it, talked about it?
No, I think it is something I want to focus on. Like, it is something that I think as emergency managers and in the emergency management field, it has to be a priority because there are going to be repercussions and emergency management will fall in there.
Right.
So it has to be something that is taken forward. It can't be something, I attended the webinar, I know a little more about Bill C5 and I can move on with my day.
Right.
Like, I do think it's going to have major impacts in a lot of different areas and we will have to carry it through.
So what's one thing you're going to do after this to kind of keep
the momentum going,
to keep digging into it and like seeing where you can contribute or what your role is in it?
Well, I think I need to learn more about it.
Right.
I spent a couple of days on it, but it's not enough.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So yeah, more research. and just having those conversations. Hopefully we can bring more people into the conversation, hear what they have to say. Like,
Yeah.
I'm still just trying to learn. So
Okay.
I want other people to say what they feel
Right.
and how they, what they think is going to happen. And then we can try to hopefully figure something out from there.
Okay. So we're going to do another part to this.
I think so.
Once you've
there's
learned,
lots.
once you've learned some more and have some more to kind of bring forward,
Yeah.
we'll do this again, and then we'll kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you.